Hello and welcome. I'm Chris from TUOTEG, and today, you and me, we're gonna unbox and assemble this Conquer. First things first, let's get this box open. Now, if you like, you could just brute force this flap off. Just make sure you watch out for the staples. Me, I'm gonna take the staples out first. Discard this foam with a flourish. Now, this is the point at which if you have anybody that owes you a favor, you want to tag them in to help you get this bike out of the box, because e-bikes tend to be a little bit heavier than your normal bike, even if it's just to stabilize the end of the box while you pull it out. Ready? All right. Thank you. Now, don't forget to reach in here and grab out your parts box. Now that you've got the bike out of the box, we're going to take all this packing material off and cut all these zip ties. You can use scissors, utility knife. I recommend something like this, little side cuts. You take your front wheel, set it off to the side. I'm going to pop open this parts box, which has your saddle, or pedals, or seat post, axle caps, kickstand, as well as your manual and your charger for your battery. First things first, now that we've got your packing materials removed, we're going to install your front wheel. It ships with hub axle protectors, so you can take those off. You'll also want to loosen up these axle nuts. And something to keep an eye on is these little safety washers. These have a little hook on them, and that goes right into your fork dropouts. Your Conquer ships with a dummy axle in the fork. This is just to protect the fork dropouts during shipping. These can be finger loosened. You can take that axle out and discard. Now, when you're putting your front wheel back in, take note of those safety washers and also of your disc rotor to make sure that it's going in between the disc caliper. And those safety washers inserted into their hole. Then I'll use my 15mm box wrench to tighten those axle nuts all the way down. Your bike also ships with these plastic axle caps, which just slip over your axle nuts. Now you've got your front wheel on. Next thing to do is put on the kickstand. Another good time to call in a favor of a friend of yours that maybe you bought him a beer last Friday and you need a hand holding up your bike while you're doing some assembly. Your Conquer ships its kickstand with the bolts installed, so you just remove those real quick. You've got a kickstand plate right on your chainstay here. The kickstand actually nests in right behind that, and then you put the bolts through the plate and into the kickstand itself. Use a 5mm hex wrench to tighten those up. And I've got a torque wrench here. This is a torque wrench you preset to the torque setting you want it to be at. You can pick one of these at any hardware store. For these bolts, we want to set it to 8 or 9 foot-pounds or 11 Newton meters. And it'll give you a nice click when it gets tight enough. This kickstand is also adjustable, so if you think the bike is leaning too far one way or the other, you just loosen up this bolt with a 4mm hex wrench, And you can adjust the height of that. What do we just do? Kickstand. Now that we've got your kickstand installed, we're going to move on to installing your handlebars. First things first is to remove the faceplate from your stem. So this is going to have to come all the way off. Take your handlebar, put it into place here, and then you put your faceplate back on. I'm just getting these loosely installed, making sure my handlebars are centered in there. So then what I'm going to do is I'm going to alternate in kind of an X pattern how I'm tightening these down. And what that does, it ensures that my faceplate clamp is going to be even. We don't want it to be all off kilter to one side or the other. One way to check for this is, as you're tightening down, is the gap between the stem and the faceplate about the same on the top and bottom? If not, then you might be a little off kilter, but using this kind of X pattern, going back and forth from bolt to bolt, makes sure that it's, whoopsies, ding! Next, I'm gonna grab my torque wrench again. These bolts should be about 4 foot-pounds or 5 Newton meters. And again, I'm gonna use that X pattern to tighten this down so that my clamp is nice and even. Now, one way to check if your handlebar stem faceplate is tight enough is to try to rotate those bars front to back. Shouldn't be able to do that. Next thing we're going to do is make sure that the stem is aligned with our front wheel. For that, we adjust these 2 bolts, the steer clamp bolts. One way to make sure your stem is aligned properly is to pinch the front wheel between your legs. You can see if your stem is aligned with that front wheel and is aligned with the frame. And you can adjust that with these bolts, which use a 5mm hex wrench. You can make sure you get that handlebar nice and straight. And then again, I'm going to alternate tightening these bolts so that the clamp is clamping evenly top to bottom. I'm going to get out my torque wrench again. I'm going to tighten these bolts down to 15 foot-pounds or about 20 Newton meters. Next, we're going to install your seat post and your saddle. Now, you've got a straight seat post here. Just make sure to note that there is a minimum insertion mark. So you just want to make sure that you're not extending the post beyond that mark when it's installed. First things first though, we're going to grease the seat tube. Now you can use a popsicle stick or a butter knife or a brush or anything. I'm going to use a glove and finger method. And really any all-purpose bicycle grease will do. You just want to get a nickel-sized dollop on there and make sure to grease the inside of that seat tube real well. Seat tube itself goes in and you clamp down with your quick release. Now you'll know if this is tight enough, if you can twist this seat post or not. But with most quick releases, you want to feel it get snug about halfway down in the clamping process. Then we can install your saddle. Now your saddle clamp has 2 nuts on it. These tighten with a 13mm box wrench. When installed, you want your saddle to be approximately parallel to the ground, and then you can switch a little bit based on your preference. So something like that. And then we'll use our 13mm box wrench to tighten that down. And here I'm going to alternate sides so my saddle clamp is clamping evenly. And now we're ready to move on to pedals. Pedals are a thing that confuses a lot of folks when they're installing on a bike, because the left side pedal is not righty-tighty, it's lefty-tighty, and that doesn't make sense. So just remember, you want to look for left and right on the end of your pedal spindles. You're going to want to put a little bit of grease on your pedal spindles using your finger glove method or popsicle stick method or dip them in the grease and rub them together method. A little dab will do you. And right pedal on right side. And left pedal on the left side. Now remember, left pedal is reverse threaded, counterclockwise threaded, left hand threaded, whatever you want to call it, but it's backwards. It's backwards what you're used to. Get that finger tightened. Then you get out one of these beasts. If you don't have one, it's not a problem. This is a big old pedal wrench. A 15mm box wrench will also do the trick. So now, you've got your conker all set up, assembled, ready to go, ready to get out for a ride. If you have any questions on the assembly process, any bike maintenance questions in general, don't hesitate to get in touch with us. You can reach out to us at support@tuoteg.com.